Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Oh, thank you. We are asking to request to modify the residential and residential time of use rate schedule to include detached garages that are on the same premise as a residential dwelling unit, but they are metered separately. Currently, they're on the small general service rate, and so we are asking them to move to the residential rate.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Moyer?
Why would there be separate meters for a detached garage? Like, is that some legacy, or is that still current practice? Like, what would necessitate two different meters for effectively the same property?
It's a very good question. Your ordinance sets that in place. So there is an ordinance in place that separate meters for separate buildings on the same premise. That is just what we've always done. And that is typical in the industry, and you will see that. However, you'll see other utilities, probably about 2 to 3 years ago, they went to putting detached garages because typically those are for residential use. It wouldn't be for a non-residential use, but it's for detached garages on there. So to comply with the ordinance that's in place, we do put a separate meter on there. But because these are domestic spaces or can be considered domestic spaces, we would ask that they move to the residential rate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions? All right, hearing none, we'll open up the public hearing for this item for comment. No one signed up to speak, so we'll close the public hearing. It's back to council for possible motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion Gray,
Second.
second Zegerman. Discussion. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. All right, we'll move now to the regular meeting agenda, consideration of a one-year moratorium on data center construction within the town of Apex. Mayor Pro Tem Happy.
Thank you, Mayor. So for some context, there's a couple recent events that have occurred. I'll start by saying Chatham County recently put a one-year moratorium on data center construction, permitting, et cetera, in their jurisdiction a couple weeks ago. And at that time, we received a number of requests for us to do the same. And although I was strongly in favor of us developing our own rules around data centers before we went forward with, considering applicants, the reality was we had an applicant at the time, and I was concerned about the look of us trying to put a moratorium in to seeming to try to influence or somehow interfere with that. I wanted to make sure the purpose was clear, and it wasn't entirely clear to me at the time. Since then, last week, Natalia Investments has withdrawn their application. We have no active data center applications in Apex, and I would ask the council to consider at this time putting forward a one-year moratorium to provide clarity to our staff so they know without any future applications they can work exclusively on developing the rules around the UDO for data centers. Certainty for the industry to know that this is what Apex is doing. We're developing rules, and then when we're done, it'll be lifted according to state law. But until then, we need the time and the space to develop these rules. So that's why I bring this item forward to you all. I've spoken to the attorney a little bit about it. I've asked her to there's actually a process here. This isn't something we can just do. We have to go through a process in state law to enact one of these moratoriums. And it's my hope to begin that tonight with a vote. But before then, I'd like to turn it over to the attorney to maybe inform us a little more on what's involved in this.
Yeah, that's correct. The state law that allows a moratorium for development permits requires notice and public hearing prior to consideration of a moratorium. So you would not be asked to consider a moratorium tonight, but essentially to give direction to staff to bring forward what you would like to see in terms of a moratorium. Depending on the term, the length of the moratorium, there are different requirements that you'd have to meet. If you're talking about less than 60 days, only 7 days notice is required. If you're talking about more than 60 days or up to a year, we'd be talking about a 2-week notice period, plus both areas have to have a public hearing, but you'd have the 2 weeks notice, public hearing, and then there's specific findings under the statute that you would have to make in order to enact the moratorium. And then what that would do is put a freeze and a status quo while staff is able to work through whatever UDO amendments that might be deemed appropriate for the council to consider moving forward with that type of use.
You mentioned a 1-year term. It's my understanding that 1 year is the maximum term that we can set for a moratorium like this. Is that correct?
I'm not sure that that is still the maximum per the statute. There's a less than 60 days, more than 60 days in the statute, but I would not recommend going more than a year. You can, at the end of that year's time, or when you're coming close to the end of that year's time, it can be extended if need be. We know that this is an ever-changing field. 1 year may prove to not be sufficient to determine what regulations you might want to have in place to ensure that the public is protected in the event that this use is brought forward. But I would not recommend anything longer than a year.
Thank you.
And it's my understanding that a moratorium has to be tied to a specific purpose, right? Like we can't just say no for a year. We have to say a year moratorium. In this case, I'm suggesting so we can finish our updates to regulations. Is that correct?
Correct.
Could you add some color to? Okay.
Yeah.
And the course of the year gives us, I mean, this isn't just a number thrown out. This is, I think, in full consideration of how long it takes for us to get through considerations such as budget, as well as making sure that the appropriate boards and advisory groups are providing the advice to us, incorporating the amount of time that it would take for us to ultimately get all of these UDO portions into the right position, and that's generally around a year. And if it looks like it's more, we can always extend more. But we're definitely looking at the process as the reason why this is a year.
Just my thoughts on the matter. I think one thing that has become, or was very clear going through this process of the application, is that our UDO does not account for a type of use like this, and so we asked staff to do a lot of research. They presented their research to us. But we need some time to encode that into a formal set of UDO rules, so that not every request basically becomes a one-off consideration. Right? We have some guidelines, some standards in place through the UDO. So I'm supportive of a moratorium to give staff the time it needs to put those rules together, update our UDO accordingly, so that next time we are better prepared for a application like this.
Now I want to underline something that you said that I touched on earlier. It's not just about the time, it's about the space that staff would have, not having to balance an active application where there's being demands made of them and suggestions made to them from the applicant about certain content. Like having that distraction, I think doesn't give the best outcome. So the moratorium will allow the work to focus solely on doing what's best for Apex, absent in the abstract, without having to consider a specific scenario like the situation we were in.
I think it's a great idea. We pursue a moratorium for data centers. We have, in North Carolina, we have about at least 90 data centers, but those data centers are all very small, like 20 megawatt, 30 megawatt, 16 megawatt. Like the one like, this one, 300 megawatt, it's rare, it's huge. So this, a data center at this size in North Carolina, maybe in other area of the United States, no better regulation to regulate this kind of huge data centers, cost massive electric usage, have negative impacts about the air, the environment. So we need better regulations to protect our residents. I think it's a great idea. We take 1 year to better update our regulation to be prepared for the future.
I just wanted to say that to segue from what Councilmember Mood just said, I had a question for Town Attorney. If we have to specify anything around data center, to your point about there being more modest sized data centers, and that's not necessarily what we're talking about, but also there's crypto mining and things that I'm hearing other municipalities like I believe Canton in the mountains was considered, I believe, also passed. Is that anything that we need to discuss this evening in terms of the parameters of what this moratorium defines?
So what I would recommend is that you all provide direction to staff if that's what you want to consider is and get recommendations back from staff regarding all of these types of uses. And then they can come back with what they see as a reasonable timeframe, because that's what the statute requires, is a reasonableness to this moratorium. And so you all will have to make certain findings. And so if it's reasonable that it's all data centers opposed to a smaller data center or a medium-sized data center, there might be some leniency in there that you want to consider, or you might want to say, no, we need to take a look at the whole thing, all of them, including the cryptocurrency and other, which are all above my head. So we'll get people with knowledge to be able to help us with the different types of uses.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right.
Make a motion.
I'm ready, yeah. So yeah, I would move that we direct staff to begin the process of putting in place a moratorium on data centers and related activities, including crypto mining, investigating what other municipalities have done, and begin that process.
All right, we have a motion.
Okay, second.
When is it supposed to come back? Is there just when it's ready?
It would have to be probably the first meeting in April. I don't think we could get the notice done by the second meeting in March.
Okay.
That would be the earliest.
So first meeting in April.
All right, so we have a motion, second, great. Any further discussion? I like where we're headed. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, passes unanimously. Good job. All right, final one, consideration of a non-standing committee to research impacts and provide policy and transparency recommendations. Kind of building on what Mayor Pro Tem Mahaffey talked about throughout this whole process. I'll start out by saying when I was first in a meeting about the proposal, I didn't even know what a data center was. So it was like a lot of unknowns, and that went through a process as well. And during that time, we saw the red shirts in here. We saw many people speaking out about data centers. And one of the things I wanted to really make sure as we move forward is that there is adequate engagement, community engagement from those impacted. And I also add this, Bruce Venable did an amazing job with the town staff, and the entire town staff was incredible in their research and presentation of information. I remember asking in one of our work sessions how many hours has been contributed to this, and I think Ms. Ken said thousands of hours. So I do want to point that out, and I want to show my appreciation to staff on that. But we can always look to involve the community more. I've always been an advocate for that. There's been a lot of concerns that may not have been noticed on our side of things because there wasn't an opportunity for that engagement. So I just want us all to be at the table together and have dialogue. It's kind of like disheartening to me to have members of the community to stand there and speak, and I can't talk back to them. We can't talk to them at all. So there's no dialogue. So I think as we move forward, if we really want to focus in on the impacts of data centers and Apex, I would like for it to be a non-standing committee. Now the question may be, well, what about the Environmental Advisory Board? Totally understand that. They focus on environmental impacts. But I think there are also other impacts that we need to bridge in the process as we move forward with decisions. Transparency is huge. I just learned the other day, and it's just, maybe I missed it, but we actually have a third-party consultant. So I didn't know that, but I want to make sure that they work with the residents as well and to hear from them. So it is my recommendation that we stand up a non-standing committee to research impacts and policy, provide policy and transparency recommendations. But before we have any more discussion, I would like to call up Dr. Michelle Hoffner O'Connor. If you would just come to the mic real quick. Yeah. She's not in trouble.
Single me
I
out.
want to see you stack the bricks.
Look, I lost at Jenga tonight. I'm sorry about that. So
I just want you to respond to my comments about the involvement of the community and how important that is to those you represent. I think that's important for us to hear from you directly.
I appreciate that. I want to be thoughtful about it. I want to be mindful of time. The first thing that comes to mind is the fact that I think the first time I ever stood up here, I said something to the effect of, we want to partner with you. And as naive as that was at the time, and I acknowledge that there might have been some conflict with an active application and developer, I believe that sentiment is still very much felt by everyone who's been a part of this movement since late summer. We've written a couple of ordinances, effectively conditions. I don't know what you want to call them. Do I suggest you use them right now? No, because I would actually like to see something stricter. But it's been a little disheartening to not see the two-way communication from that when we submit those to the record. At least I haven't seen anything come through. But when it comes to the good faith, the transparency aspect of it, I apologize, this is going to take a little bit more time to explain. I have some firsthand experience with this. When I was at UNC, I think it was 2018, this was the year that the Confederate monument Silent Sam was knocked down by a lot of students. This was the year of a bunch of, I'm going to say, firsts. I think I mentioned this at another council meeting, that there was a group on the food chain for student fees that basically brought, my group in, said, we're enacting a $65 deferred maintenance fee without your input. You guys can ask all the questions you want. We're moving it forward, that we can't rely on the state for money. We need to maintain buildings. We need to fix buildings. And everyone in that room was angry. And we made sure that the student body knew that this was moving forward without our consent, especially since they were foregoing fees that were actually needed to actually help students. I think it was a couple of weeks later that there was an announcement that the disposition of the now fallen monument was to put it in a new museum that was going to cost $5 million. So suddenly you have a rumor that money for the deferred maintenance fee is actually going to be for the museum. And there was nothing anyone could do to change people's minds about that. There was no goodwill, because both of those instances had absolutely no input from students whatsoever. And UNC, especially at that time, really did collaborate with students. That was the kind of environment that I was working in, that Stephen was working in, who comes to a lot of our meetings. I think that aspect is important. When there's no input, there's no trust. And for better, for worse, right now we find ourselves in a situation where the communication often does feel one way. I do think there are things that are said on the record that are very valuable. I'm not saying that they're willfully ignored, but certainly I sometimes wonder if they're being heard. So where I stand, I think this committee can create that opportunity. I don't want to say to repair, but to give that voice back that feels lost for some people. I know a lot of people, as much as I want to commend Bruce for the amount of research she did, there are people who are really waiting to see the responses to the follow-up questions. How is that going to be conveyed? And that hasn't happened yet. I think the last thing I do kind of want to touch on is the fact that I respect public service immensely. I recognize it's many hours and not everyone gets recognized for it. Certainly, you're not an hourly worker. There's no overtime pay necessarily. And I think as much as our planning department is equipped to, do research and create UDOs that our EAB and even our planning boards are, seated to help along with the process, that to give them all more work and expect it to be the highest quality isn't realistic. We could say, we could take a 2055 plan approach to gathering feedback rather than a subcommittee, that would take too much time. If we're going to use the year properly, we have to hit the ground running. It makes more sense to add in people who are invested in this, and I acknowledge that that might mean that there are a few pro data center people out there. I stand here not wanting a piece of crap near my home, but I'm willing to learn that maybe there is a feasible way that doesn't brings something, reasonable, safe. I think a lot of us are looking for those conversations in that two-way street, and I think this is the most realistic approach in order to make it happen.
All right, thank you so much for that. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
So with that, and again, I just want to be on record, like, I love everything the staff has done so far, and it's not to redo the work. That's not my point. It's just really to build on it. And I want to take a step back to 2020, I think 21, when we were looking at the affordable housing, and we heard from Mr. Welch tonight about that, and it was a new thing to us. We were trying to figure out how do we move, what direction do we move in, and we talked about forming a committee to really bring all the information together, working with staff and working with community stakeholders to put that together. We eventually dissolved it, but I think it was really great work, and I think we have the opportunity to do the same thing here with this subcommittee. Again, non-standing, we get the work done. It's focused on data centers specifically. And to Dr. O'Connor's point, EAB, they have a lot to do, and they have other things coming, on their plate. So this would be an opportunity for people who want to be involved to engage. They want to engage. They want to be a part of what's impacting our community. Why not do this? Why not connect everyone together and we address these things as one? So I would love the support of my colleagues on moving in this direction. That's it.
So I appreciate the sentiment, and I acknowledge the need for having the community engagement, the two-way interaction that you describe. Where I'm a little hesitant here is we have standing committees and advisory boards. You mentioned the environmental advisory board, but we also have the planning board. We just went through the process of nominating people that we thought were qualified to these boards tonight. And for the last couple of years, we've been talking about how do we get these boards more involved in the act of policy making and bringing advice to council. It feels a little bit, and this may be a strong term, but it feels like a little bit of a vote of no confidence in the people that we just appointed. If the very moment that an opportunity like this comes up, where we can actually actively engage these boards, let them, self-organize, spin off a subcommittee if they want, add new members to the committee if that's recommended. So the moment that something like this comes up, that we stand up a new committee instead of letting the existing boards serve us. And so I think this is an opportunity. I think it's an opportunity for the Environmental Advisory Board in particular, but probably with the help and or representation from the Planning Board, to really dive into a topic like this and do all the things that you say, but without necessarily setting up a brand new committee in the first place. Doctor also mentioned that we want to hit the ground running. I agree with that. Like a year sounds like a long time, but it's not. By the time that we form a new committee, appoint members and all of that, I think we're going to be losing, 1 to 2 months at least, before that committee is fully formed and up and running. And I think that using the structures that we have in place today, I think we can make quicker work, get out of the gate more quickly. So I appreciate and support the spirit of what you're trying to achieve. My preference would be to run this through the existing advisory boards that are available to us.
I have 2 thoughts. The first, something that I've been wanting to say, the process for amending a UDO and the process for a rezoning is incredibly open and has a ton of public input. It's statutorily defined. The reason people don't believe that or know that is because in this case, we didn't get to that public input. We never got that far in the process. They pulled it before they even got to the public input part. This project never came to us. It died very, very early in the timeline of what a process is. Had it gone to the thing, you would have seen all the meetings. You'd have seen the reach out. You'd have seen all the letters. You'd have seen the planning board meeting and all the stuff there and the votes there. You'd have seen the council meeting, which would have been a big thing. So I just want to defend the process as it's statutorily defined is in fact open and does involve a ton of public input. I also want to compliment our staff and all the work they did and the work that they've done to putting this together. I think that we don't quite know where we're at yet, as we heard earlier. I'm not sure, after hearing from the attorney, there's still some questions about the scope and the timeline. So we need to answer those questions. Also, as the representative of the Environmental Advisory Board, I can tell you guys, they are dying to get another bite of this apple. Because what happened last October, when was it, September, the Environmental Advisory Board meeting, what that meeting was and what their scope was severely misunderstood to their detriment and really bothered a lot of them. And it really hurt the morale of the Environmental Advisory Board because it was represented in the media. Everyone believed they were voting on the data center, and they were not. They were voting on a set of recommendations to the data center, which is an entirely different thing. And it was represented like they approved the data center. And I can tell you, the blowback they got from that position really bothered them. And now I do want to say, if you guys have been watching the past couple meetings, I've been trying to empower that board. I've been talking about them bringing back rezonings and having actual votes on the merits of the matter, which is not what they do today. And there's issues with that we have to work through. And we've added public hearings to their meetings now as well. We've added their minutes to the board. There's stuff we're trying to do to empower them. And I'll just say, I'm comfortable with saying on their behalf, they would love to have another bite of this apple and do what they were empowered to do, or rather chartered to do, put it that way.
And I just want to respond to that. And I totally understand we have some very qualified, passionate members on that board. But I do want to talk about the transparency part of it as well and the process itself with data centers. So again, that input, having a group that's focused on data centers would really help us. It'll support the EAB and the planning board. So another opportunity for community members to be involved. But I hear your points clearly. Anyone else?
Okay, you sure? Yeah. I was going to say, first off, I greatly appreciate not only staff, the public, the incredibly engaged public, the folks down in New Hill. I mean, it's one of the most inspiring things for me personally as an idealist, a community building idealist. I love seeing people put slight bits of difference aside in order to work together. I think that's been incredible. I mean, they had committees, and so I mean, the teamwork and collaboration, I think, is commendable. And I'm proud that those voices are in our town. The one thing I see a bit differently, Mayor Gilbert, is, and I appreciate the spirit of the proposal. One of the things, as I thought about it over this weekend, and I talked with a few folks, and I reflected on some of my experience in my day job and around the country in standing up committees, is there's a bit of a law of unintended consequences with these committees. What sometimes happens, and some of the people I just actually talked with over this weekend are incredibly knowledgeable on this stuff. They are the people actually doing it and then have concerns about how it may impact their own community. And they say, I am traveling 50% of the time. There's no way I could be part of any community. I can't even apply because I simply just don't have the capacity, the bandwidth, and that's incredible knowledge that they might be able to provide when they get off the plane, land, get home, and on that Saturday afternoon, they're able to submit to a public comment portal or some of these other things. So that's the one thing I wanted to point out there. The other is that from what I've learned from looking at what other municipalities here in North Carolina, from Canton to Fayetteville, have taken on this issue with varying degrees of success. I know that in Fayetteville actually created some conflict between committees that they have. So that's another thing that I think is a challenge when it comes to gaining that feedback. And so I absolutely agree with, and one thing I do want to address also is the precarity of this situation through these last few months, and why you've had to see staff be so incredibly sharp and not respond directly to this application, even though we all kind of knew that it was at least referencing some the possibility of that project. But one of the concerns also is how we can optimize that feedback process without reinventing the wheel. We've got, I mean, this is absolutely a huge issue here in Apex. It's even bigger than Apex. It's bigger than the Triangle. It's bigger than North Carolina. It's bigger than the region. It's a global issue, as was addressed earlier this evening, talking about some of the Scandinavian models for data centers. But my position is that we do want that transparency. We do want that feedback. There's, I think, the possibility of staff not only assessing how other municipalities and counties, I know that wouldn't necessarily directly translate to what we're doing, but to assess how those moratoriums are being rolled out. So again, we don't reinvent the wheel on that, and also optimize that efficiency. There's troves of studies. The public forum, perhaps we were able to archive some of the great things that have been presented to us for the past few months. Perhaps that's something that staff could do. And I think that especially since it's been 120 hours since we received official notice that this project has been pulled, and we're now just adopted the process for instituting a moratorium. I think we should see what this process yields in the short term to gain that knowledge. But I really appreciate the sentiment and the spirit.
I'd like to hear from
Anybody else? Anybody else? Want to jump in?
Right.
You want me- It's like, unless she looks like she wants to go.
You go ahead.
All right, good. All right. What I love about this idea is that it does provide another aspect for public input. And to be clear, the reason why that application was pulled was because of public input. And I think that's something to have a full understanding of. You know, it died, as Mayor Pro Tem Mahaffey mentioned, early in the process because there was a significant amount of public input. And we've heard, you know, meeting after meeting about the impacts that data centers are going to create with regard to noise, with regard to particulate matter and air pollution, with regard to water and our water impact, electrical, lighting, you know, even down to just the impact of how it will impact traffic and things around the community. And as I look at each one of those areas, I see a big area, you know, when we look noise, water, particulate matter, air. These are things that we've already pushed towards EAB. So when Councilmember Zegerman mentioned that we do have the EAB, I like that idea. I hadn't thought it through in the sense of the idea of allowing a committee to be stood up under the EAB, because I do think that would be a good flow. It would provide an opportunity for a citizen-based group, but I think that placing that under EAB might be a good solution set for them. And I don't need to go through every single person up here knows my stance on committees. I may be going a little bit beyond my past practice of talking about my feelings on committees, but I will say that I think that the empowerment of the committees, the fact that we reduced the number of committees that we have was really important. Because I felt like as we started making more and more committees, we started to dilute the effectiveness of other committees and unnecessarily create inefficiencies as we start to relate things. But I like the idea of being able to have that additional community voice. I mean, it's been there. It's the reason why they don't have an application. And it's a big reason as to why we want to make sure that we have the time to build the right UDO. So I think in getting that right, I think maybe having this sort of organization underneath EAB where you've got that expertise already, where you've got a group that have a process and a procedure in place would be good. It's an idea. It's an idea I hadn't really thought through until my colleagues started talking about it. And I'll tell you, I'm intrigued by that. I like that. I do. I think it would also give. Yes, I've talked to many folks on EAB, and they've got feelings about how this went the first time, and this might give them an opportunity to have that redemption moment that I think many of them want. But I think larger picture, all of the issues that we know we're going to need some subject matter expertise on, and that is going to be developed when it comes to creating what's the appropriate vehicles and issues we need to make sure are addressed by the UDO. I like the EAB. And I like the idea of maybe placing an organization like this, letting them create and manage and utilize them as a way of getting the input so that when we eventually get their input, it's got a really solid basis. I don't think it takes away from the voice of any resident who wants to be on it. In fact, I think to be honest with you, as we've all said, the number of topics that we've received during the course of the weeks with, from studies ranging from the quality and amount of particulate matter that is being ingested and possibly brought into someone's lifespan at the age of 3 all the way up to the age of 40. That's a really technical area, and I'm glad that we have that sort of ability to have that sort of technical area be researched and ultimately narrowed down by an EAB. That knowing that the mayor thoughtfully picked those folks gives me a lot of impression that they're a good group to be able to help streamline some issues for us. So I think I'm leaning towards that. I like the idea of a resident committee. I do like the idea of it being under EAB though.
Okay, let me be clear. So, Ed, you are proposing that we have a kind of like resident committee, like subcommittee under EAB, right?
Yeah, and I'm not sure how that looks. I mean, honestly, I sit here and I'm like trying to figure out like what does that look like? How does that happen?
Just to kind of clarify my position. So my preference is, so again, I agree with the spirit of the proposal, and I do want to invite that interaction with the public, right? My preference would be to refer this to the EAB and let the EAB figure out how they want to handle this. If they want to handle it as a full committee, if they want to spin off a subcommittee, that they want to focus on this topic, I think that needs to be the EAB's decision, right? My preference would be for us to take this proposal, refer to the EAB, and tell them to go make it work. We have existing structures set up there. There's existing practices and authority already delegated to that board. So I don't think that we need to necessarily prescribe how the EAB is going to do it, right? I just want to refer to the EAB, let them chew on it, right, and come back with a proposal on how to do this and do it quickly.
Can I add one thing to that?
Yeah.
I really like Councilman Gray's idea. I can definitely live with that. We heard from, I think it was Ms. Martin, yeah, talking about the economic impacts and how this really touches the community in that way. That's not an EAB function. There's also the other side of transparency and the process. Not saying that there's an issue, but I think there's opportunity to enhance that. So that was another purpose of allowing that resident voice to come in, who've been very active, by the way. They're going to give you a lot. I know I was talking with the town attorney as well, and I think one of the questions was, did you envision this subcommittee having perhaps people who are pro data center? Absolutely. It needs to be everybody at the table and stakeholders. So I want Apex to be the model in this situation. And this is an opportunity to do that by getting those voices all together at the table. I don't see any issues with it. We always talk about transparency. We talk about public engagement. This is a golden opportunity to get that done.
Right now, we have a public forum at EAB meeting, right?
Yes.
So just like council meeting is open, is to public. Just like all these incredible red shirt folks, I appreciate you. Yeah.
You want one-way conversation. I apologize for being out of turn here, but we're talking about the potential for a two-way conversation to provide expertise in economics and health
Come
and
on.
other areas.
This will be the last time, so we got to move on. Yeah.
I can only listen to this.
Okay.
You know, I stood up here, I acknowledged what the EAB voted on that night in October. I was disappointed that when they pushed on the developer regarding renewables, they then backed off. I was disappointed that there was a discussion regarding the amount of diesel fuel that would be stored. And there was virtually no pushback on it. I would also like to point out that the developer misrepresented the amount of fuel that there would be there, or the amount of generators. I am not saying that means the EAB is unqualified. I think they deserve an opportunity to do their portion of it. But as we have demonstrated in this room, this is engineering, this is health science, this is so many other things aside from, you know, water and things that we would attribute to the environment. So I implore this group to ask yourselves, is every aspect covered? And if the answer is no, then those people need to be incorporated somehow. A substructure, the nuance of it, that's not my area, that's not my place to debate. But the thing that I have been primarily concerned about throughout this is the concept of you don't know what you don't know. We need people who are going to be innovative and forthcoming and excited and energetic. And I acknowledge that the EAB is part of that. But there are other people in this community who are capable of providing the things that isn't fair to burden them with, that isn't fair to burden planning with. It's no different than hiring more third-party consultants, except that's pretty expensive. So I do think it needs to be fair. What you put, the responsibility that you give boards has to be within their realm, their wheelhouse. Not everything is going to be. And what happens when that happens? I think you all need to consider what it means for citizens with those backgrounds to provide that information. Thank you.
I have two more
Thank
thoughts.
you. One second, I was going to respond to that, and I'll let you go, Mayor Pro Tem. I just have one question about the. No, you're fine. You go see. Thank you so much. The third-party reviewer. How have they been involved in the process? Can someone speak to that? And what is that name of that firm?
So I will ask. I don't know if Diane has anything to add, but as staff researched and recognized, as we got feedback from council and different questions came up, there were some skill sets that we did not have the expertise on. And so we reached out to a third party and engaged them. I don't know how far that research is yet, if it's begun. I think it was in response to a lot of the questions that came out of the work session.
Yeah, as far as I know, we have a contract. That's how far it's gotten. Because we were waiting to hear if we were gonna have another work session. I mean, we've been in limbo waiting to hear back what was going to happen, and so now, we'll be able to engage with them.
Okay, thanks for that, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thanks. I have two more points I want to make after the discussion. The first, and just like again, I needed to implore everyone that the rezoning process that we never actually went through is incredibly open and community involved. The UDO process is incredibly open and community involved, and we can add more meetings. I know people haven't gone through that because you may not be aware, but it actually is. It's defined by state statute. There's laws about having these meetings. When you see earlier when the mayor forgot to do the open and close things, because there's a law that says we have to physically say those words. Okay. I also want to say, when our staff goes off and does this stuff, all the time they consult with the community. They have design meetings. They have stuff in the way that we're speaking about this is like, it almost presumes that staff is not going to do those things, and they are, and they do, and we should let them do their job. Unless we don't think they can do their job, then we should handle that. But they're able to have these meetings. They bring together advisory groups of citizens all the time. There's other structures here if we let them do the work. So I wanted to say that in defense of the work staff does, and observe with everything else, all the other projects that staff undertakes. There's plenty of groups that they bring together. There's plenty of meetings. There's multiple public forums that they have outside of us to gather input in that way. The other thing I wanted to point out is we don't know at all what we're doing right now. If you heard the conversation earlier, we don't know the timetable. We don't know the scope. We don't know when staff is going to come back and do that. Like tonight, although we gave direction to begin the moratorium, we have so many unanswered questions that got brought up about the law and what we had to do. To jump ahead and start empowering boards to work on something when we don't know what that something is yet, I think feels a little premature to me. So.
Well, I do want to respond to that. The premature report, we'll start there. This was building on what you just recommended with the moratorium as part of the process when we start really taking a deeper dive into how data centers will impact Apex and building those UDOs. I'll say this is the third time. Staff has done an amazing job. I'm not taking anything away from them. They're very capable. I was a staff member for 29 years. I didn't want anybody invading on me either in my job. But this is new. This is something different. We have never dealt with this. So why wouldn't we consider bringing in residents? It's just, and I understand. EAB is focused on environmental impacts. Clear. We have staff too. But what's the problem with having an organized group that roll up their sleeves, they're working together with staff, community members, and even other stakeholders to just try to do our best work for Apex? I think it's a great move. I think it's great for transparency. It's again, a model, and it sends a message to our residents that they were part of the process.
I'm not understanding the implication that if we refer this to a standing committee, that residents will not be involved. Like that's kind of what I'm hearing from the comments being made. That's not the case. Like, to the Mayor Pro Tem's point, like, we can schedule, information sessions and public, input sessions and, stand outside during Peak Fest and all of those things can be done as part of the proposal. And if EAB is too limited, then let's give it to the planning board and let them go cross-functional and get it all done. And so I just don't see the need to stand up another committee if we already have established committees that are chartered to do these things for us. And I want to give them this opportunity. We've, rarely do we get an opportunity of this kind to put these boards and committees to work for us the way that we've been talking about. I think this is a golden opportunity, like you said, but I want to give that opportunity to one of the existing boards that we have instead of spinning up something brand new.
I totally hear you. I'll go back again to, we have people who come in here every single council meeting talking about engagement, transparency. And again, this is Mayor Pro Tem, totally agree. Staff knows what they're doing. I'm not trying to interfere with what they do. This is to support them in their work. It really is. Why wouldn't we? Again, environmental planning, they got other things to focus on as well. This group would be super focused, laser focused on this item alone. It's more efficient, yes.
I just wanted to reiterate that I laid out, I think it's too limiting. I don't think it's broad enough. And I think we have an opportunity to, I mean, this is a pretty big sandwich to, you know, find a place to, where to take a bite. And I think standing up a committee at this juncture, again, optimizing what knowledge we already have. Transparency issue, I've spoken with folks about the transparency issue. Things were very different when we had an applicant at the table. And also, I mean, in terms of public forum, when folks come up and speak, I mean, we're not supposed to respond. So, I mean, the two-way conversation, this isn't the venue for that. This is the venue for residents to bring those things. And then I think an additional layer is entrusting that those communications are being built into the reports that staff are going to be assembling, and also are going to be coming to your members of council who are going to be vetting this. I mean, this is a data center committee.
Who's data center committee?
This right here, the folks at this dais.
And I trust the folks at the dais. Again, I'm just trying to give the community members an opportunity to be a part of the process. Can you just weigh in on Councilmember Gray's maybe recommendation to have a subcommittee under environmental? What are your thoughts?
Do you want to talk more to what that idea is? Forgive me. It was my understanding that you were inferring from Councilmember Zigerman's, and Councilmember Zigerman said, actually, let me clarify. So I just want to see if that was.
No, and
this is a new idea?
Yeah, no, that, because as Councilmember Zigerman was talking, the idea of, all right, you know, because I don't think that just a freestanding citizens resident committee is going to be efficient for us. I do think that we have EAB, and if they stand up a committee under them and they have the ability to basically create, because I don't think there's a problem with having that input from the residents, but I do think it should be routing through EAB. I think that is the mechanism that we currently have in place. Resident committee under EIB, that to me seems like an easy fix on this one. Now, I hate to say it, there's a lot of pieces that we don't have in place. Size, composition, how to get there, who gets on it, all those sort of things.
Realistically, I mean, do we have a...
I would punt that to EAB. Let them figure it out.
In effect, are we taking the over-under on this coming together by May, and we're already, you know, June, July? I mean, it feels to me like we can be even more nimble through some of the current processes. Again, it was 25 minutes ago that we gave direction for initiating the moratorium. I feel like that's...
And I do, you know, I don't want to compromise the quality of what this resident advisory, this subcommittee could do just by rushing, because we try, and I'm not saying you know, let's take the time and stand up this subcommittee and let them be a part of the process. I just don't see how it would hurt anything. I just haven't heard that at all tonight.
Well, here's what, it's not that it would hurt, it's just I don't know if it optimizes. And it may actually put a drag on our ability to move as swiftly as we need to. And so one of my things, as I'm thinking about what Councilmember Gray has just laid out, perhaps there's an opportunity, again, Mayor Pro Tem, you're overseeing, or you're the appointee to the EAB. Is there a way where EAB can essentially bring in star witnesses and vet what those folks have to say? I mean, I feel like there's already, again, to some of the structure conversations that we've had. And I also want to say that I think I don't know how many folks, I know a lot of the folks in red did. I don't know how many folks in the community got a chance to, and I hope they didn't spend too much time, but we had several work sessions where we talked about these issues at length. and we're vetting layers of this, and I only, I expect that would be a process that we would be going through yet again.
Yeah, and the work session is still not community participation.
No, I wasn't saying that. I was talking about the EAB offering bringing star witnesses to ensure that we have folks in that two-way.
And EAB can do whatever they want. I have some more thoughts. I just want to reiterate what I'm trying to say earlier. I think the problem that makes me uncomfortable here, if I could try to articulate, is it almost implies, like, it does imply that staff was not already going to do this. Take a look at Peak Plan 2055. Take a look at all the design things we did for the downtown plan. Take a look at the tunnel under Tingen Bridge. There were tons of advisory groups and design charrettes, and community outreach is an integral part of what staff does every day. And I think that's the uncomfortableness, is like the idea we have to send up this committee for public input. It does sort of imply they weren't already going to do that, and I think they are. I think they'll do what needs to get done, and we should let them at least try to do their job here. So that's kind of where my frustration is coming from. I think if I could, that's what I was trying to articulate earlier, to reiterate. I want to point out we have no active data center applications. I will
say it again. I'm sorry.
I'll point out we have no data center applications today.
Oh, right.
I will say it is not likely we'll get one again. Like, I know we're all excited, but it's not likely we're going to get one again. That's just the reality. Staff won't say that, but they're thinking that. Like, no one's going to see what just happened and say, you know what, next year, as soon as the moratorium's gone, I'm going to jump right in. And as I'll say that as a politician, because I think I can be a little more, now that we don't have an application, a little more frank with you all. We're probably not going to get another data center application. And if it would come, it would be after we put this UDO in place. So please consider that. I've been telling people that. That's my opinion. One more point I want to make. You asked how it could hurt. I would say the difference between what you're suggesting and what I'm suggesting with a staff-led process is the level of formality. Committee, first and foremost, will be something staff has to organize and support and staff and respond to and get the meetings together. Staff-led process, they have a lot more flexibility in how that's organized. Second problem, involving us, politicizes the process. If we're making appointments to a committee, it's now a political committee that we're appointing. And then we're gonna have to fight over the applicants. And what's the range of applicants and who's appointing them and what's the vote gonna be? That's not necessary here. If staff does it, we're not involved. The process is actually cleaner. I think we should let staff do their job. I hear what you're saying about the EAB. I don't think we should do that either. I think we should tell staff, go do this. And if we think they're doing a bad job in 3 months or 6 months, or in 13 months when the moratorium is off and the next day we get 27 data center applications, you could immediately at that point stand up a committee and do it. But I think it's premature at this point. We should at least let staff try to do this job. They're very good at it. They've done it for many other projects that have gotten a tremendous amount of public input. The statutorily defined process has built into it. We haven't ever gotten to it, but it has also a tremendous amount of public input with multiple public forums where you're actually speaking on the subject matter. We've all been coming and listening to our regular public forum because it's never actually gotten to us. Once it gets to us, there's processes and public input that's required as a part of law that would happen. Bring it back home. I think staff can do this. They're really good at getting public input. They're hearing that the public wants to get input. They've always been responsive to doing that. I think we should let them try. Thank you.
All right, I'll go back again to, this is number 5. I'm not saying staff can do it. Staff can definitely do it. This is different. This is data centers. And as far as us being involved as a politician, I'm totally okay with people knowing that was part of the process, right? Because there are no applications at this time, and that's what we're elected to do, represent the residents. They elected us, and we advocate for them. So we could probably spend another hour talking about this. Again, I'm asking for support.
Again, I appreciate the sentiment. I also appreciate the sentiment expressed by Mayor Pro Tem that this, is within staff's wheelhouse, and we do solicit public input through various means. on the regular. Again, my preference would be to stand up refer this to the environmental advisory board, let them chew on it, see how they can do it, work with staff on this. And, if that doesn't work, then, we can find another way, but we have the existing structures in place. Again, like in terms of how it can hurt, I think it feels like if you are an appointed board member today, and the moment that something meaty comes up, like a different board gets stood up, like that feels demoralizing to me, right? And so I want to give our existing board a chance here. So I will make a motion to refer this to the Environmental Advisory Board for their review recommendation back to council on how they think they can organize a committee with the intent of the public input that you're suggesting.
So, just so I understand, so you're more aligned with Councilmember Gray?
So Councilmember Gray goes a little bit further by prescribing a subcommittee to the EAB. Like I'm just asking to refer to the EAB, let the EAB decide how they want to self-organize. If that results in a subcommittee, I'm perfectly fine with that. If they think they can do it, as an extending or part of their existing mission, that's fine with me too.
Who would research the economic side of things and?
They can pull in those stakeholders, from staff or from the residents. I do think that there's other areas beyond the environmental aspect that I agree are relevant here. But by and large, the concerns that we have heard from the residents have focused on environmental impact, and that includes energy use, water use, noise pollution, light pollution, air pollution, right? I think this is predominantly within the EAP's wheelhouse, and that's why I'm choosing kind of that committee.
I understand. Just a quick question of legal, and I'm not saying I'm going this direction, but I do want to hear, is there anything that prohibits a council member or member of the elected body of forming their own group in the community to get information and to work together?
It would not be a town committee. It would be, it could not be funded or supported by the town unless it is something that is authorized by the town council.
Okay, thank you.
I may have some concerns from a different perspective. We don't have a clear rule or procedure, about residential, residents standing committee or subcommittee. I say this is because this time, for this data center, we heard most from our folks. They are against, right? They have experts from all kinds of different areas to give data analysis, but we don't have, the folks from the other side. I believe they do because they don't have, because their voice may be too small or too few people, so they just don't even bother to voice. So, but it doesn't mean in the future those people, do not care or want to voice their opinions. So, if that happens, how should we handle another subcommittee or standing committee for those group of people? It's, I think probably you don't like my, speaking of this kind of scenario, but it is reality, right? We have to think about a clear procedure, how to handle this. It's possible, right? Yeah.
And Councilmember, I appreciate that,
Yeah.
and I did say before, and I talked to our attorney about this. My vision was to have people on that subcommittee that may be in support of a data center, so everybody's working together.
Yes. Ideally, it's like that. No matter you are against or you are for, but I don't think those very few people, they have the courage to join this group. I'm just, speaking of the possibility, it's the reason, because I saw people, from social media, right? And somebody even sent me a message before, but I received most are against. But I did, receive 2 or 3, they are for this. So it's possible. So I think we need a more clear, more standard procedure for this topic, because it's complicated. And if other group said, oh no, you have, most people are from this group, but are not from that perspective, it's if we want, all voice to be heard, to be, and all residents feel it's a fair procedure, we need to proceed with more clear, rules or guidance. That's my opinion.
Okay, thanks everybody for the
Yeah.
input. I know we spent a lot of time on this. Thanks everyone for your comments. Going back to Councilman Zegerman's motion, could you clear that up for me?
I'll
again,
make a
please?
motion to refer to the EAB,
Okay.
this topic of data center research, and how they want to handle public input into that process to inform the UDO amendments, work with staff on that, and then ultimately bring policy advice back to council.
May I make an amendment to that, to ask that we ask EAB to provide essentially a report to us within 60 days as to their findings?
That'd be great.
That way we would give them, a month to figure it out, and then 60, another 30 days to figure out a way of coming back to us. And then we can take a look and see what their proposal is and either ratify or say, go forth and conquer. I think it's important that the subordinate boards have the ability to carry out their functions. But I do think in terms of an overall compromise, this would give them the ability to figure out how to put together, if necessary, a resident committee. And I dare I say, I don't think anybody who has heard our conversation is going to say, nah, we don't think so. So I think I like the idea of putting the trust in the EAB to come back and provide something back to us within 60 days.
I'm fine with that amendment. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I also want to add maybe some amendment, like we explore the opportunity to for residential committee in the future, because yes, yeah, it's another okay, not it's another okay.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we got the motion from Zegerman with the
As
amendment
amended
from
by the council.
Councilman Gray. And you accept that?
I accept that.
Okay, all right, very good. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Gray. All right, any other discussion before we move for a vote? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that's unanimous. All right, thank you. All right, let's move to closed session. We have closed session 1 and,
I'll make a motion to go into closed session.
all right, motion Zegerman.
Second.
Second, Gray. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you all for being here. See ya.
Thank you.
We're good? Okay. Is there any other business? All right.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Not at 1:50.